Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday morning here at Accenture's new technology lab. Welcome. My name is Karen Tucker, by the way. I'm CEO of the Churchill Club. And I think we have a real treat in store for us this morning with Rajat Paharia, Patrick Salyer, Jim Whitehead, and our moderator, David Fetherstonhaugh, talking about gamification of everything. The genesis of the program was a prediction that Bing Gordon made on the Churchill Club stage last year that gamification of everything will be one of the top trends that we will see explosive growth in about 5 years' time, so about 4 years' time at this point. And so this panel is here to dive down and really look at the opportunities that that represents for all of us. I would also like to extend a very big thank you to Accenture for opening their doors to us. Would you please help me in thanking them? A very brief introduction to Churchill Club for those in the audience less familiar with us. We are a 27-year-old premier business and technology forum that is dedicated to encouraging innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. And we do this through the up to 40 programs that we present each year where like minds can connect with one another and with ideas. We are a nonprofit and we are member supported, and if you would like to join us, we would welcome you to do so. We have an outstanding set of programs coming up over the next month or so and beyond, of course, including Shell Oil Company President Marvin Odom, that's tomorrow at the Rosewood Sandhill. The incoming ARM CEO, Simon Seagars, next week up in the city for a breakfast on May 9. Massive Sensors and Data here at Accenture, another in our series to examine the top trends. And the 15th annual Top 10 Trends event here in the Santa Clara area in the South Bay on May 23rd. And these are just some of the programs coming up, so be sure to keep an eye on us and either get on the mailing list or just watch the website as the new programs get posted. If you are tweeting, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter codes in your printed program. Our moderator, David Fetherstonhaugh, has a truly diverse background. He's a Stanford guy, having earned 3 advanced degrees there, including a PhD in psychology. He is an entrepreneur at heart, I think, having founded and led 2 venture-backed companies through several growth stages. He's led large-scale research projects in areas such as terrorism, environmental protection, and health risks. And after the financial meltdown in 2009, he got back to his roots and his core interest of behavioral science. And he had the idea to bring it to the world in the wild, real time, instead of academia, which is where most behavioral scientists resided at that time. And so he put together a roadshow and he took it out to companies, and his pitch started with, "I think you need a behavioral economist." Most of the time that was met with blank stares. One time, however, one very important time, it wasn't. They said, "We do," and that was IDEO. And today, David is a behavioral economist at IDEO. Let's give him our warmest welcome this morning.
So can you hear me? Okay, welcome. So give me a show of hands. How many people have played a game this morning? 6? Okay. Actually, you're all playing a game. The name tag, if you think of one of the benefits of the Churchill Club is networking. And the challenge is, how can I find the people that I want to talk to? And so we've all categorized you, and you selected out there game player, game maker, game spectator, or game curious as a way to kind of help you find each other. How many commuted this morning to here? Okay, you've also played that game, which is a multiplayer game called Driving, right? Which is all about cooperation. And we're actually going to start right now with a 3rd game. I guarantee you've actually played others. You may not see it that way at the end of this hour. We hope you will. This game, I'm actually just going to start the timer now, is called the Thumb Game. It's another multiplayer game, and I want you to put your drinks down and your phones and turn to the player next to you, and we're going to play the thumb game. So I can't do it with myself because my thumbs are, so you grab, and the goal of the game is to get as many pins as you can of your partner's thumb. Okay, and let's start at, start at 30 seconds. 5,
There you go. Yeah, okay.
4, 3, 2, go. Okay.
Uh-oh. I've never lost this game,
Okay,
so I'll let you know.
Hook hands like this, right, like this.
I think it's a losing
Yeah,
proposition. And then you do that. That's good.
You got me.
I've never seen this
Okay. All right, 5 more seconds.
Tough job, huh?
Okay. All right. So,
Yeah. It's great.
I need, who think they may have won in the group, the most pins? Okay, how many? 3? All right, so this is what usually happens, right, is that we automatically assume we need to compete. And if you think about it, if you were to cooperate with your opponent, you could just pin, 1 a second. And if we did this over 30 seconds, you would have hit 30 pins and you would have won, right? So, I think we're trained to compete, and we think of this famous guy, and here's what he said: sympathy is the strongest instinct in human nature. I think most of the games we play are really about cooperation, not about competition. And if you look at the stereotype of gamification, I think people often assume it's about competing. And certainly, there is elements of what we do that's competing, but I think it's actually more about cooperation. So what I'm going to do is, over the next 5 minutes, just have a bunch of the gamified world actually wash over you with some examples from the real world in different domains. So you can actually see what I see, and maybe we see, we'll find out, from our panelists of what gamification actually is. So how many of you heard this awesome phrase before? The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So I think one of the reasons I live here is because we have this incredibly biased sample of the future in Silicon Valley, and my guess is that's a lot of the reason why you guys are here too. So I want you to meet your future in gamification. So we gamify the workplace. So this is gamifying cubes. This is Pixar lets its animators basically decorate huts and caves, which is where they work. Those are cubes in Pixar's world. Here's a bathroom experiment at IDEO. Off in the right, there's a provocation. What are the unwritten IDEO core values? And these are solo bathrooms, so people go in there and are quite transparent about answering those questions. So this is one I had to put up here. That's me. This is another kind of useless interaction, but actually it creates a sense of belonging and awesomeness at work, which really translates into the thing that companies really want, which is productivity. So you can actually gamify the urinal, right? So on the left is the sign, look, keep it in the bowl, people, men, right? That's a much more clever way to design a game, put a fly in the urinal, and men, am I right? We know exactly what to do, and we play really well all the time. We actually gamify driving, right? So the sign on the right works a lot better than the game on the left. Both of them are games. This one's just lame. That one, when you're speeding, a frowny face shows up, and it works a lot better than even feedback of how fast you're going. Here's another one that IDEO did a couple years ago that would basically, it turns a climate change denier, makes them look exactly like a tree hugger, because what happens is when you're heavy on the pedal, then the flowers and the bush on the right starts to wither and go brown. When you're easy on the pedal, it actually blooms, right? So that's gamifying driving. We're gamifying K through 12, turning this kind of slit your wrist game, right, which is clearly a game, and grades are the scorecard.
Do you know what that is?
Broccoli.
What about this? A good old friend. Do you know what this is, honey?
Celery.
Who knows what that is?
A pear.
A pear? No.
A turnip.
No? Okay, I'm going to give you the first word. Egg.
Egg.
Okay. So there is no shame. It's all great fun, and they're learning a ton, a lot more than in the other one. We're actually gamifying our genes. So the game, and I won't name the company, delivers your genome personally to your desktop. Actually, and this is the report. Actually, before this, they say, hey, do you really want to know this? Really, do you want to know this? No, seriously, do you really want to know what we're about to show you? Okay, here we go. The 1,000 ways you're going to die, right? Which is not a great on-ramp to your personal genome. Instead, Genentech asked, in this case IDEO, to create a different on-ramp that actually will kind of attract you in. And since all of our basically swab your cheek within 24 hours, you get back your unique genome, and we basically put it to use it. So this is a unique song that represents a unique genome, which is a much more pleasing introduction to your future life with your genes. We even gamify bath time. And for those of you who are parents and have gone through bath time woes, you can have Elmo call you. This is something we created recently. And this is what happens. You can queue it up for 7:30 p.m. when bath time is. And it's like, oh, look, honey, Elmo's calling, right? And then this is when you answer it. This is the game that often is played. And the Elmo game is the one that reinvents bath time.
Hi, it's Elmo. Elmo heard that it's time for your bath. Oh, Elmo can only talk for a minute because it's time for Elmo's bath, too. Oh, Elmo loves taking a bath. Elmo scrubs his whole body with soap. And Elmo always remembers to wash between his toes. When Elmo's done, he shakes off his fur like this. Do you do that? No, you don't have fur. Oh, what's that, Mommy? Uh-oh, Elmo has to go before the water gets cold. Bye-bye. Oh, coming, Mommy. Coming. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that's bath time reinvented. We're often asked at IDEO, what's the future of X? And many times what's driving it is some crisis, right? And so we love this quote because there's opportunity and downside. And so we're a part of a large group that's basically gamifying health and well-being. So this is from fun theory, I think, from VW. So it induces you to kind of take the stairs. Every time you take a step, a different piano note shows up. Not everyone wants to exercise, but everyone does want to play. Thank you, thank you, Connect, for reinventing exercise in the home. Here's another one, a little concept we created. We all look at the back of food labels, and that's a game, kind of, right? Think, we look like it's actually useful and it was actually informing our decisions. Let's create a new currency about how long would I have to run to burn off this food product, which completely reframes my decision about what I will eat. So here's one from Massive Health. You basically snap your food, share it with your friends, they rate it, right? And when you aggregate that over individuals and then over a nation, here's what it looks like. So this is a little video over time. Green is good food, red is bad food. So here we are in the morning time. This is North America on the left. And you see at late at night is when America has, right here is when it has its hand in a chip bag, right? And so that gives you a whole new view of our national health in an inspiring way to kind of keep you on the path. And we're also actually gamifying financial well-being. So here's another little concept that basically creates a new currency and to change the purchase decision. Hey, I really want that shirt. How many hours do I have to work to actually earn that? Because you plug in your salary. Oh, no, thank you. It's not worth it for me to work 5 hours to have that shirt. I'm going to pass. Thank you very much. And then another one is Bank of America, keep the change. If you know, slide the debit card, it rounds up and puts the change into your savings account. I've had a number of people come up to me after I said that IDEO created that. They grab me by the shoulders and they say, I love that. So it's gamifying savings, right? So savings is no longer arduous. So just some examples from the world about gamification. And whether you like it or not, that's the way we're going. And to kind of launch us into our expert panel here, I've created 3 provocational hunches that have, I think, some truth in them. And I'm sharing them as a way to kind of prod us, you as well, which you're going to participate in this discussion as well, but also these gents here. The first one is actually the world is already gamified. The gamification of everything is more about our journey to replace bad games with good ones. We're playing games all day long. We just don't look at it that way. Games are most powerful when they're not framed as games, right? So if you're leveling up and earning points and getting your mayor badge, not to discount that. That's a really cool, engaging world that is powerful, but not for everyone. When you create games that are not framed as games, I think it ends up applying to more people with more sticky behavior change. And then the third one is when you don't like an outcome, don't blame people, blame the game. It's not their fault, it's our fault. That's our opportunity to reinvent the future through engagement through games. So, what do you guys think of those 3 provocations?
I'm gonna. My name is Rajat Paharia. I'm the founder and chief product officer at Bunchball. Also, author of an upcoming book called Loyalty 3.0: How to Revolutionize Customer and Employee Engagement with Big Data and Gamification. It'll be out June 18th. And I'm actually going to disagree with your entire definition of gamification. Right? I think there's 2 different ways people look at this word. And it's easy to get confused because it's got the word game in it. And some is like, let's look at the whole world as a game. There's actually 3 probably, right? One is the way you've kind of framed it, which is like, let's look at the whole world as a game. Everything we do is a game. There's rules, we're players, all that kind of stuff. The second is the actual game creators, like people who make video games, who start with nothing and they create something. And the whole purpose of that thing is to entertain. Right? We're not talking about either one of those, at least not in our business, in my business. What we're talking about is the third thing, which is using these data-driven motivational techniques from video games to motivate business outcomes. Right? At the end of the day, it's all about business results. It's not about fun. It's not about entertainment. As you know, 1,000 failed game studios will tell you, like making a good game is hard. And then making one who's got an ulterior motive of like trying to teach you something or be an advertisement for something is even harder, right? And so what really this is about, it's not about like making the whole world fun, because fun is this really abstract concept, right? I think it's really hard to manufacture fun. I think the Tom Sawyer story is probably the best kind of apocryphal example of this, right? Tom is sitting there painting the fence. There's nothing he'd rather be doing less on a beautiful summer day. His Aunt Polly said, you have to do this. And then his friends come by and start teasing him, like, we're going down to the lake, we're going to have fun. And he's sitting there going like, well, it sucks to be me because I'm sitting here painting this fence. But then he decides, I'm going to act like there's nothing in the world I'd rather do more than paint this fence. And his friends start getting intrigued. Then they ask if they can help. Then they start offering to pay him to paint the fence, right? And at the end of the day, he's sitting there in the shade with all his riches, and all his friends are painting the fence. They were all painting the fence, right? Tom was doing the same exact thing that all his buddies were. It was just a bit that flipped in people's head, people's perception of the task that changed. For Tom, it was work. For them, it was play. And I think that's one of the key things here about gamification is the turning things I have to do into things I want to do. And really, it's all about using data. At the end of the day, like I think what Patrick's company does, my company does, we are now living in this world where everything we're doing is throwing off data. Our community life, our entertainment life, our work life, everything's throwing off data, and all that data can be used to motivate people using these techniques that video game designers have used for years. Things like fast feedback, like transparency, showing you exactly where you stand, giving you goals to accomplish, giving you badges that indicate expertise and achievement in a community, giving you onboarding techniques that games do really well at training people without it feeling like it's being training. And then the social component, right? We're all inherently social creatures. So community, collaboration, competition, points as a way of keeping score, like all these mechanics that have been proven in the video game world, you can take and you can layer around business experiences, driving sales performance, driving help desk activity, driving training, driving collaboration, driving compliance, getting fans to engage more, enhancing loyalty programs, all these opportunities, but it's really about data-driven motivation and less so about entertainment, fun, or games. Games are the wrong frame for this, actually.
Okay, so Patrick, I see you nodding. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then Jim, before you launch off, because I know you have a lot to say, Jim, then you introduce yourself as well.
Sure. So as a way of introduction, Patrick Salyer, I'm the CEO at Gigya. Just to give you a sense of the perspective I'm coming from, Gigya is a venture-backed company backed by Benchmark Capital Mayfield Fund. We were started in 2007. We work with 700 enterprises, so these are really the largest consumer-facing businesses in the world, like Verizon, Pepsi, Nike, NBC, and others. And we actually come from this from a little bit of an adjacent angle. We have a platform that makes websites and applications social. So consider this as adding a social layer to a website or application. And a key component of this is driving and incentivizing behavior. So building off what Rajat was talking about, that's something we care about a lot. We have our own gamification platform to do that. And I will save my comments, but one of the things I'll just say as a starting point is I think the term gamification is the worst thing to happen to gamification. Yeah. It's just a term that I think it really can be bended and sort of positioned in ways where it's really not. So part of, I think, to begin this discussion is almost saying what this is not doing, what we're not talking about, and then that can help get us into the real value that it can create.
All right. So I'm Jim Whitehead. I'm a professor and chair of computer science at UC Santa Cruz, and been engaged in some research projects around gamification, and then also want to point out in the back my PhD student, Chris Lewis, who is currently doing a PhD dissertation on gamification, and so he's actually at the point where he'd love comments on his dissertation, so if you have interest and time and want to learn more, go see Chris. So I guess, I would say, I tend to agree with the observations about gamification as a term, although I kind of feel like the term has left the station, so we should probably get on with it. Although I'll be provocative and say one of the things I don't like about gamification is this sense that Rajat said, which is, it's like this salt shaker that you can serve, okay, this business process meat doesn't taste so good, so we'll shake a little gamification salt on it and it will taste so much better now, right? And I think that, in fact, sometimes to make an activity more playful, sometimes, as David showed, you can take an existing activity, add some behavioral nudges to it, and make it more effective. But I think there's other situations where you actually have to dive into the design of that activity and really change what's going on inside your business processes so that they actually will be more amenable to a more playful approach.
So I may, I'll build off that. I think playfulness is an important part of gamification, but I actually think it takes a backseat to talking about this point of incentivizing behavior. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's the core of what we're talking about here. And incentivizing behavior, first thing people think about when they think about gamification is points and rewards, or sort of badges. And I think that there's a place for that, because if you think back to our childhood, how many people in here got like gold stars for doing anything when they were in kindergarten, right? Raise your hands. There's a couple. So there's something inherently that we find satisfying about getting a star when we do an activity. There's something at our core. You can't avoid that. Like, we've been doing that since we were kids. So that in itself will drive behavior. But I think there's actually things that you can go beyond that are actually even more satisfying. So that would be kind of one component to think about incentivizing behavior. But there's so many other examples in that, and I'll just touch on a couple very simple ones. So LinkedIn. On my LinkedIn profile, I've got the progress bar. And the progress bar tells me how far my LinkedIn profile is complete. I've been at 95% for about 3 years, and I can't figure out how to go to 5%. At least once a month, I go to LinkedIn to figure it out. And I don't know how to do it. If you guys know, let me know. But that's simple. It's great for LinkedIn because I'm filling out more of my profile. Mint.com does the same thing. So they're trying to get me to connect every one of my accounts to Mint, and I'm like creating bank accounts just to try to get to 100%. I really don't know how they do it. But so you have that aspect, which is just I want to get to a goal, and that's very satisfying to me. Of course, the leaderboard concept, it's a simple concept, but it's really, it really gets at our core. Like, at our core, we're competitive human beings. I mean, the example of the thumb fight just shows you what that means. So there's a deep satisfaction to knowing that I can get a higher score. Now, you have to be careful with that, because if you're in 1,000th place and they're only showing the top 10, that's not very satisfying, so someone's going to give up. So that gets into the game design. But again, it's a core incentive. It's a core behavior. There's status, right? That's been in the airline industry forever. And that's getting more nuanced. So again, I'd say the first thing you have to do is say it goes beyond points and badges, although those work, believe it or not, because it's at our core. And then there's these other incentives that we need to start thinking about.
So Patrick, so I have a kind of a different starting point than you. The currency that I think about is behavior and actually kind of the needs of users. And it sounds like because of your enterprise, you guys kind of begin with the notion of the business. And so when you begin with behavior, I really see gamification as this technique to create buoyancy to transition from one habit to another. So, and can you monetize that? Absolutely. Is monetizing the point? In my world, sometimes, but it's usually not. It's a later filter is business. So when you look at it that level, yes, these examples I showed were quite fun and engaging, but that to me that's just the surface point. The deeper point is actually behavior change and habit formation. So I wonder if through that lens, if you can talk
Sure.
about your business and how you view the world, and does that change what counts for gamification for you?
Yeah, I think habit formation is a great lens to look at things. We talked about there's two constituents you serve when you're implementing this kind of stuff, right? One is the business. Like, we're a business. Patrick's a business. Like, we need to make money, so companies need to pay us, and they're paying us for certain results that they want to have. So you have to start with the business and what their objectives are. We start every program with like the mission statement. We want a 20% increase in customer sat. Like, that's in the good mission statement. And then from there, you figure out what are the KPIs, how are we going to measure this so we can determine whether we're successful or not, and then what are the data points that we can use to optimize this on an ongoing basis. So we understand the business and their objective really well. And on the other hand, you understand the user and what motivates them. Because in every context, it's different, right? If you're trying to get kids to exercise versus a sales team versus moms that are buying Chiquita bananas to engage in a marketing promotion, you've got different motivational triggers for each one of those groups. So one example I'll give you around habit change is a nonprofit called Hope Lab in Redwood City, founded and funded by Pam Omidyar, the wife of eBay's founder. And her whole mission with Hope Lab is to combat childhood health problems using technology. So their most recent initiative is called ZAMZI, and it's all about combating the tween obesity problem. And the way they're doing is trying to get kids to exercise more, to move more. So they built an activity monitor. It looks like a USB stick. The kids plug it onto their belt. They run around all day. It's kind of like Fitbit for kids, right? And then they plug it into the USB drive of the computer. It uploads all their activity data. For every 10 minutes that they spent in a certain activity zone, they earn points. If they do more than an hour, they get stars. Certain days are double points days. They have all their data graphed out for the last week, month, year, so they can kind of get their quantified self fix in there. And then they can unlock badges for hitting certain milestones. They can level up when they hit certain kind of long-term goals. They can take these points and they can spend them on virtual goods to customize an avatar that represents them in this community, or on parent-funded dollar value goods, like an Angry Birds plush doll or an Amazon gift card. And by doing this, by integrating these motivational mechanics, again, data-driven motivation around their physical activity, they've been able to show a 59% increase in activity amongst these kids over the course of a 6-month period where it's sustained. They just did a study with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which is the equivalent to them doing like 45 minutes of push-ups a week or something. Like, it's something crazy, right? And it's dropped blood sugar levels and slowed the gain in bad cholesterol. So that as a way of like scaffolding these kids up, these kids that aren't going out and exercising anyway, that don't have any internal motivation to do it, but now you're applying these external motivators to get them out, to get them moving, and you're scaffolding them up to a point where that stuff can fall away and they're starting to feel better about themselves. I can fit into better clothes. I can get up the stairs without being winded. People are asking me out, whatever it is, right? Like, all of a sudden I feel better, and now that intrinsic motivator takes over. And I think the really important part here about that kind of behavior and habit change is certain of these changes are really hard, and the feedback loops are really long. Like, I want to lose 5 pounds. I go to the gym. I don't lose 5 pounds. It takes me a month of going to the gym to lose 5 pounds, and not eating cupcakes and not sleeping in, right? And those are like immediate gratification, right? I would have loved to have stayed in bed today and eaten cupcakes, right? Like, that would have been like the ideal morning, but that didn't happen, right? I'm here with you guys, right? So there's all these like immediate gratifications that you're trying to compete against to get this long-term abstract goal of losing weight. And it's really hard because it's so tempting to go for the immediate one. And what gamification can do is apply these interventions that keep you on the path, give you these intermediate goals and rewards to work toward so that you can hit that long-term goal of the weight loss.
So am I hearing then that really the long-term goal is to awaken the intrinsic motivation and to get to the point where it's like, hey, I actually like how I'm looking. I really am enjoying these clothes that I never would have fit in a year ago, where I no longer need the ZAMZI or the leveling up? Or
Sometimes.
the leaderboard.
Yeah, sometimes. The use cases are very different. On a sales team where you're trying to drive sales performance, that's not the goal, right? The goal is to drive sales
So
performance.
keep it extrinsic. Basically, you know, your clients are like, yeah, don't remove the points thing. This isn't about intrinsic motivation. Drive the extrinsic.
We can talk a little bit about extrinsic versus intrinsic, but the whole idea is you're driving ongoing performance.
Yeah.
It is not something that should fall away at some point. Or, you know, customers of ours like Adobe using it to teach people to use Photoshop. So now you're scaffolding them again to like a skill level where they can then take over and use it by themselves. But it's not always about just getting them to a point and having it fall away.
Okay. So I want to dive into kind of the frontiers of gamification. My guess is you're dabbling on those frontiers. But I wanted to know first, since we're, you know, on the you know, the perhaps largely digital platforms and creating new behaviors, new digital behaviors. I'm wondering if you have anything to add, Patrick.
Well, you know, I think what I would add is inherently gamification in the business environment doesn't mean incentivizing things that aren't good for people. Like, and you know, I'll give you an example of something that's happening in the automotive insurance industry. So one of the insurance carriers are actually allowing you to carry around a device in your car, and after 30 days, if they determine you're a good driver, you get actually lower premiums. And so the end result is great, right? The insurance company is going to get an increased margin. The individual is actually going to save money, and hopefully we're going to have safer driving experience on the roads. And they actually have implemented, that just touches the surface of what they can do with gamification. You can start actually incentivizing more game-like behavior within that experience. And so, you know, I think that just touches on the surface of what's going to start happening in these various industries, just beyond like what you think of as traditional digital.
Mm-hmm. So you guys, you know, in medicine, we have our technologies that are kind of way ahead of our ability to think through their implications over the long term. And as I was kind of preparing for our discussion, I was craving some kind of gamification ethicist, right? So we have medical ethics that help us understand kind of long-term implications. And I'm wondering if you guys, if you guys ever, you know, worry about, you know, because we're kind of, one way, it is a nasty way to frame it, but are we in the business of forms of addiction, right? Where it's like, I'm hooked to my phone. I call this my second wife. This is not a game. But we develop new behaviors that often can look like OCD behaviors. And I wonder if you guys worry about that and how you, if your clients are kind of expressing concerns like that and what you guys think as you kind of squint into the future.
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't say that's not something that's coming out quite a bit, but I think there's another thing that's related that is going to be a big deal, which is the privacy implications around some of this. So one of the things that we really focused on is tying identity, who a person is, to these various behaviors. And as Rajat mentioned earlier, what we're really talking about here is big data. We're able to track in a more structured way everything that's happening and everything. And so, and we're actually able to tie it to who I am, to a Facebook identity, or to other types of identity online. And when you start thinking about some of there's a lot of implications, I think, in healthcare, insurance, and some of these other industries. So for example, perhaps I'm using some sort of like one of those, I don't know if you've seen the Basis watch, but it's a watch you can wear that is initially tracking some of your vitals, right? And it's really designed to make you healthier. But that's now being tied to my identity, and it's going to be tracking this over time. So let's say 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, you know, I'm signing up to get life insurance or something like that. And they're able to actually somehow obtain some of that information that somehow impacts my premiums. Or maybe it's something even more serious, and it affects my ability to get a job or to get insurance or something down the road. And so, you know, I think we have to be cognizant that we're leaving these various data trails in these various applications that are starting to be, I think, a lot more impactful. And we have to start thinking about what the privacy implications are there. And if you think about the Google Glasses, it even gets to even a bigger extreme, right? Because now we're not just measuring ourselves, but we're starting to measure those around us. And you know, I think there's ways to overcome a lot of these things, but I think these are things that we're going to have to think about as a society to really move forward.
So we're starting to approach the frontiers, and I'm wondering, Jim, you know, if you can give us a sense of kind of in your lab, where you see things moving, and some interesting, perhaps surprising areas that you might expect to see in the future in the market.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of our focus right now is probably from your perspective back to the future, in that we're working on a set of design patterns that people can use when constructing games, and this is the core of Chris's dissertation. And what's nice is that these motivational design patterns are being tied back to particular motivational desires that people have. And so there's a fellow named Stephen Rice who wrote a book in 2002 that laid out 16 of these core desires that people have, things like power, need for exercise, romance. And these patterns are being tied back to these particular core 16 areas of motivation. And I think what's nice about that is that once you understand how different design patterns correlate back to these core desires, you can analyze a particular game and say, okay, is this gamification effort really using mechanisms that end up reinforcing what it is you're trying to achieve? And so Chris found this great example. There's an app out right now to get you to learn more about the new upcoming Star Trek movie. And so your goal in getting this app is you are curious because you want to learn about this new movie. But the app is all about going up to movie posters and scanning them to get points, so that, and it's not even clear like what happens when you get these points. And so the design pattern that's being used are points, which ties into a sense of power and mastery. But what your core motivation is for getting this app is to be curious and to learn more about this movie. So there's this disconnect between the gamification approach and people's core motivation and going after this experience.
What's that? What is that disconnect?
So the disconnect is that the core motivations are different. That your motivation, why you would ever use this app, is curiosity. The design pattern, the scoring, ties into power.
Got it.
And so they're just different motivational desires. And in this case, people are unevenly motivated by all of these, but in this case, like, you don't engage with this app to increase your sense of power and efficacy in the world. You do it because you like Star Trek and you want to learn more about this movie.
Got it. So it seems like your starting point, you're talking about needs, and you're creating this taxonomy around needs that you can use as a game designer to pull different mechanics, if you will, to support different needs. And I'm wondering if it's actually kind of theoretically the same, right? In the case you're talking about, the needs are the people's needs, and the needs you're designing for, same mechanics, but it's first the business and then the end customer, perhaps. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we start with the business, but then we also, I mentioned with the end user, we need to understand what motivates them. And so we've gone out and looked at all the different motivational theory, and we kind of identified like what we think are the 5 key intrinsic motivators that get people going, and that's based off of self-determination theory, which is a couple of professors at the University of Rochester, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, came up with this theory, and basically it says we're motivated by autonomy, so the ability to control like what we do when we do it, mastery, feeling like we're getting better at something, or competence, and then relatedness, like we're all inherently social creatures and want to connect and validate and be validated and communicate. And then to those, we've added 2 others that we found really powerful. One is purpose, as kind of articulated by Dan Ariely in his book, The Upside of Irrationality. And then progress. Teresa Amabile, professor at Harvard, talked about how the #1 most motivating factor at work is feeling a sense of progress, no matter how small, towards a meaningful goal every day. That's it. Much more so than recognition, than pay, any of the rest of those things. So you take those 5 things, and you'll see that all these various gamification mechanics, the ones I listed off earlier, like onboarding and leveling up and all that kind of stuff, they all like map to one or more of those intrinsic motivators. And those are really good when you have something that's intrinsically motivating. Like, I'm a fan of a TV show, or I want to learn Adobe Photoshop. Like, I want to do these things. And then there's this whole class of jobs and tasks that aren't so intrinsically motivating, like filling out an expense report, or making a sandwich at the local deli, right? And there you need to think about the extrinsic rewards, because I'm only going to get my mastery at making sandwiches is going to hit a peak at some point, right? And then you need to figure out like what are the external motivators you can apply to people to get them to perform better, to want to do better, rather than something that they have to do. And so I think that's kind of the way we see the world.
Cool. So we want to turn it back to the audience here, because I think they probably have some burning questions. First, I want to ask you, this is a frontier, we think a lot about designing for government. We actually, where I work, design a lot for local governments, state governments, and designing new forms of engagement. And I'm wondering, as you squint in the future, how gamification will play in the future in terms of the government and private-public partnerships. What do you see and what do you fear?
Sure, I think there's absolutely use cases here, both within the government for employees. We were at a government agency the other day, and they were complaining about their compliance training and how nobody was going through it. And like every month, they have a new training course that they have to go through around all these different, ethics policies, travel policies, whatever. So there's tons of opportunity just within the government for employees to use these mechanics, and then for kind of engaging with the constituency, engaging with the citizens. Somebody asked me recently about like, how would you gamify voting? And I'm like, well, the way I would do it, if I'd try two things, right, as experiments. One would be to say, like, why don't people vote? Well, it's because they don't feel like there's any sense of accountability if they don't, right? I'm sitting here as an individual citizen, there's the country, and there's this like giant gulf in between. So what if somehow there was some notion of teams or collaborative effort, and my effort helped out the team, and the entire team would lose if I didn't vote? So whether it's my block, my city, my state, some accountability to somebody else, which we've seen works incredibly well in almost any situation, right? This peer pressure of not wanting to let your colleagues down can, I think, be actually a really powerful way to get people to vote. And the other thing is giving people extra votes, right? If you vote for 1 year, then next year you get 2 votes. If you vote for 3 years, next year you get 3 votes. And that encourages people not to break the chain, right? Like if they don't vote for 1 year, they're all the way back down to 1, and they only get 1 vote again. And so you give people extra voting power.
Let's talk to Congress about that.
Yeah, right.
So I'm glad to hear that you think about this stuff. We actually just launched a project to kind of reinvent voting in LA County. So we should talk. So I wanted, before getting off the government vein, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Sure. What gets me excited is this notion of taking activities where you want to engage a really broad set of people in order to solve some big problems. So essentially doing kind of crowdsourcing through the activity of creating an engaging game. And so, probably one of the better known examples of this is this protein folding game that was made at Washington Fold It. Here's an example where you do draw very heavily from game design to create game-like experiences, but with this goal of crowdsourcing some kind of activity, in this case, trying to figure out the structure of proteins. So we're very excited in taking that idea of creating games with the crowdsourcing goal and then applying that in many different contexts.
So this is like citizen science, where you kind of activate the army of kind of interested users.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's
AKA free labor.
Well, I was astonished, at the recent Game Developers Conference to hear, there was this game Space Chem, which is like a very hardcore puzzle game, and it had, tens of thousands of players, and I was shocked that, like hardcore puzzle gamers were, that big of an audience. And so that, if you can tap into even just a small part of that core puzzle gamer mojo, that's a lot of people who are very smart working on your problem.
Cool. So let's turn it to you. We actually have 2 roving mics, and this is being videotaped. So if you have a question or a comment, raise your hand, and then a mic will come to you.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, I'm Ted Kahn from Design Worlds for Learning. I'd like to know something about the opinions of the panel about slowdown versus speed up. So many of the games and so many of the things on the app, and as you were talking about your phone being your second wife, et cetera, the autotelic kind of feedback that happens by quick responses and by always having to be connected, I think has a really interesting downside. And there are a number of people who have been writing about what it's like to slow down and the mindfulness things that we're losing in terms of being rapid responders and gathering stuff together. So I'm wondering how this plays out in your views of gamification?
I think, I mean, the things you're talking about are just kind of like they are in the air around us, like we're the fish in the water, and like that's happening. We don't have a choice about it, right? And one of the things that people love about games is the immediate fast feedback you get, that you immediately know whether you're doing good or you die, right? And so then you can either adjust your strategy and you learn, and you use that to consistently evolve and get better. And that's kind of one of the hallmarks or tenets of gamification, is this idea of really fast feedback in systems, because slow feedback systems just suck, right? Anybody who's tried to change the temperature in a shower where it takes like a minute for the water to change temperature, you know like how frustrating it is when that feedback loop is big. Or you take a flight and you land, and like 5 days later you see the point balance in your account go updated, when it should have just been like as soon as you landed, you got like cha-ching, you just earned some points. And so this idea of like fast feedback as a way of learning really quickly in kind of a real-time format, I think is really powerful. But kind of to your point about slowing down, I think that ship has sailed, right? Like the Gen Y, the millennials, they've grown up with this stuff. My kids are surrounded by iPads and technology and phones, and like it's not going to get any slower for them. And I think it's going to be, maybe there'll be movements like slow food, slow tech.
So is mindfulness, is that something we're not able to game? Which is, it's a little bit of a hyperbole, but I think it's a super interesting challenge.
Zen koan.
I think two things. One is, when you figure this out, let me know, because I'd like to slow down myself once in a while. But two, I think there's an interesting trend around the quantified self, which is basically utilizing technology and devices to actually measure things that you're doing. And why I think this is important is because it will allow you to start still using gamification, but it's happening inherently without you having to do anything. Like right now, you have to pull out your iPhone and track what you ate, or how far you ran, and all these things. And all this will just be happening inherently. And that's going to continue. Right now, there's little tiny like devices you can tape on your skin, like a Band-Aid, that can actually measure like how much calories you're burning. So it's going to get pretty interesting there, I think.
So there's a movement afoot to kind of embed mindfulness and compassion. It's kind of arising in business schools, actually, which is super interesting. A couple weeks from now, we're hosting a little phase 0 workshop around mindfulness and the idea of embedding compassion into digital products. I bet you would. I'm looking forward to it as well. So I think it's a really interesting challenge. And yes, I think the ship has sailed on the connected world. But I think it's a super interesting challenge for gamification experts, such as us, to actually think how you use it to slow down and maybe use less digital products. A bit of a mind bender. Other questions? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Carol Blanchard, and I'm just a senior business analyst. And I was listening to how this sounds so universal. And the principles that you're describing are sort of what we wanted communities to do at one time, families to do, how we organized our companies. And there was always in the dream of, at some point, another click up where we were challenged to be conscious of our choices, be aware of the choices that we made, and beyond that, to a kind of character and character building. We even talked about character in the community after a while. In business, we talked about how we treated people, and then we talked about how that was good business. And I was wondering, and at the end of the day, I think we looked almost back less at badges and more about the effects of those choices that we made. So I was wondering if in gamification there's a point where you begin to also raise the issue of choice and the cascade of personal choice.
Jim or Patrick, do you have a comment?
I guess I'll talk somewhat tangentially in that, there are definitely starting to be researchers who are looking at patterns of game design and for gamification, and realizing that some of them are actually ones that are, have as a broader outcome things that are kind of evil or not really desirable. And so one, I guess, example of this is when all the Facebook games started up, and then people were really encouraged to send out notifications to all their friends, and then it sort of quickly took over people's feeds. And so, this ended up having kind of very global, very negative consequences quickly, and then the system reacted. So there are a cluster of these, design patterns where if you put them into your game, you can quickly, take a gamification effort in directions that you might not like. But I think if they are identified and if you start developing a sense that, hey, these are ones that we want to avoid, then that, I think addresses some of your concerns.
So I have a comment. Charles Duhigg's book came out about a year ago on habits. I don't know if any of you have seen it. Habits that kind of put habit formation front center. And we kind of automatically think habits, if we just turn it into a habit, it'd be free sailing. And I think actually, to your point, is like, actually, let's unhabitize some things that aren't so good, become aware of them, right, which is the unhabit part, so that we can create new habits that actually meet our needs better. So I'm pretty intrigued by the idea of kind of, building that awareness. I think the idea, most of the decisions we make are automatic. We have no idea that we're making them. When we're driving, we're not thinking about turning left consciously. And it's a little disturbing if you start to think about free will and actually how much control are we in if we're just kind of always on automatic. And it violates our kind of narrative that we have that I'm a rational human being and I will bring in data, evaluate the alternatives, and select the one that has highest expected value. That's a nice narrative, but it really doesn't describe the real world. Doesn't mean you can't become aware. So I think gamification could be another tool that actually could unhabitize things so that we actually can start designing for the things we care about. So I love that. We had a question here.
Hi, I'm Todd Young from Euclid, and I'm working on what I think is one of the most challenging problems in game theory, which is how do you make Common Core standard mathematics fun for a 7-year-old? So my question is about how do these motivational theories, how are they a function of childhood development? What your guys' thoughts on that? Can you point me to experts in the field? That's what I'm working on.
Khan Academy seems to have used a lot of this stuff very effectively. What do you think about that? Can you get the microphone back to him? Sorry, please. Thank you.
Sure. I think Sal Khan's a genius. I've been to a lot of his presentations. I like what Khan Academy's doing. I obviously think there are a lot of room for improvements and other products around Khan Academy, but I'm looking more at motivation for younger kids and how you've got these different frameworks. You have 5 and he's got 16, and how do those things develop as humans develop? What does a 7-year-old's framework look like? I mean, I have 3 boys, so I have a pretty good idea, but a lot of stuff we're not going to talk about here. But that's what I'm looking into.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I have a middle school age daughter, and she's doing Khan Academy for her math, and I'm just shocked at how well the badge system is working. And so I have a suspicion that kind of points and badges probably work better for kids and young adults, and probably tend to work not as well as people get older. But I haven't seen any hard data behind that, and I haven't seen a lot of study on kind of how sort of the motivational structure changes over time. And across these 16 core human desires and this Rice framework, different people are more motivated by some desires than others. Even as adults, I haven't seen a good kind of analysis of, like, as a trend, you're more motivated by certain things when you're younger and more by certain things when you're older. But that seems, it seems intuitive that there would be changes as you age. But I haven't seen research that describes that change.
Yes.
I'm right close. I don't think I need a microphone.
Yeah, actually, this on video, yeah.
Kind of on the my name's Moni, and kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, for unstructured kind of brainstorming and creativity development, what are you using internally to kind of bring about innovation, bring about new ideas through the use of games?
So, I mean, I can speak from IDEO. IDEO doesn't have very many rules, written rules anyway. There's 7 rules, and they happen to be brainstorming rules. And you would challenge me to actually call them all off by memory. Encourage wild ideas, build on the ideas of others, as a way to kind of create the context for support and optimism in the room. Because at IDEO, the devil's advocate is the devil because it completely shuts down creativity because now you're kind of defending ideas that are probably bad in the first place. So that's one structure that we use at my company. Maybe you guys have others around creativity, gamifying creativity.
we haven't played in that area much at all, so I don't really know, aside from having been at IDEO and used those same rules.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, there was a question here.
Hi, my name's Tracy.
Tracy, we'll make this, unfortunately, the last. Our party's just about over, so
okay.
you get the last say.
So I'll end on the money question. So switching gears to commerce, I'm in the e-commerce field. And so what are you seeing as you're inside enterprises, the use of gamification beyond the traditional loyalty and rewards programs that exist today, mostly for sort of our generation? What are you seeing in the use of gamification that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, so look, the book I just wrote is called Loyalty 3.0, and the whole kind of thought process there is Loyalty 1.0 is the traditional loyalty program that we all know, right? Frequent flyer programs, buy 10, get one free. One data stream coming in, this transactional data stream about purchase, and then one constituent being served, which is your customer. But what's happened now is all of a sudden you've got all this data, again, that your customers are generating. They're not just buying. They're writing reviews, they're star rating, they're sharing to the social networks, they're engaging in promotional offers, they're watching videos, they're doing all sorts of things on your commerce site. All that can be the raw material of a loyalty program. And also there's this notion, I often talk about loyalty programs, traditional commerce loyalty programs, as having a beginning and an end, but no middle, right? You get really excited at the beginning when you sign up for this thing and you think about all the great things you're going to get at the end. And then at the end, when maybe you've gotten there and maybe you're getting great things, or maybe you're just getting magazines, who knows? And then in the middle, there's this like giant gulf of opportunity where there's like no actual loyalty being generated. You're just grinding, trying to get to that end. And there's this huge opportunity in the middle to figure out how to engage and make your customers actually loyal using these gamification techniques. The same way that Hope Lab used them to keep kids on the track to losing weight and getting healthier, you can use the same thing to keep people more engaged and more loyal to your program. So I think there's huge opportunities in commerce, and we've recently signed several customers in that space.
The one thing I agree, and I'd add to that, which is data and gamification is almost becoming a differentiator. So here's what I mean. I think if you look at Nike Plus, it's really, really interesting what they're doing, because they've gone away from just having to come out with the latest, greatest shoe and get people to buy the shoe to people storing all of their running behavior data in Nike Plus. So there's a reason to buy Nike shoes if they're actually tracking data from your shoe next time, the time after, and the time after. And you could start to see some of these embedded devices as quantitative self in different clothing maybe. And so actually the data becomes a reason to go with that brand instead of another brand.
So it sounds like the new loyalty is kind of the interaction is baked into the product opposed to some kind of bolt-on that's from the coupon world, what have you.
I guess I'll just add a cautionary note, which is all of these efforts to increase engagement and to do gamification, at the end tend to require additional attentional resources being focused on whatever that thing is. We only have so many hours in the day. We have only so much time to spend doing these attentional activities. And my guess is there's some point at which they all start competing with one another, and taking on one additional gamification activity causes another one to be thrown by the wayside. And so there's, I think, a limit to the gamification of everything, which is we only have so much mindfulness we can focus on things at any given day.
So our time is up. Thank you so much for coming. I think we have some final remarks here.
Thank you very much. Thank our speakers for sharing your perspectives so freely with us, and David for your very creative and effective way of leading the conversation. As a small token of our appreciation, please enjoy this Churchill Club speaker t-shirt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome.